Hello and welcome to the 18th Annual Tallgrass Film Festival. I am Chris Renteria, a filmmaker, Tallgrass alum, and film advisory board member. I'd like to thank our sponsor who is joining us today. If you are enjoying yourself, let everyone know on Facebook and Instagram and tag us at Tallgrass Film and hashtag Tallgrass2020. I'd like to welcome Variables Director Sabina Bajraka. Born in Bosnia-Herzegovina, Sabina immigrated to the US as a war refugee in 1994. A natural storyteller, she started working in theater as a teenager, eventually getting her BFA in theater directing and stage management. After graduating, she worked in New York City, focusing on devised theater and movement experimental approach to Shakespeare and other classics. Her first film, the critically acclaimed feature documentary Back to Bosnia, premiered at the 2005 AFI Fest and screened at over 30 festivals worldwide, winning Director's Choice at the Crossroads Film Festival. Sabina is an Annenberg Scholar, a student BAFTA and Oscars nominee, a member of Film Fatale, Film, WIMPS, and Lincoln Center's Directors Lab, and an alumna of Ryan Murphy Half Directing Mentorship, the Nantucket Screenwriters Colony, and the Stowe Story Labs, where she won the Tangerine Fellowship. She holds an MFA in Film and TV Production from the USC School of Cinematic Arts, and I'd like to welcome Sabina today. How are you?
Thank you very much. I'm doing really, really well. I'm so happy to be here.
Excellent. Well, we were here to talk about your film Variables that everybody has either seen or is about to see, and this is the Q&A for that. But I wanted to start out by just asking you where you got the idea for your film.
Well, my first film that I ever made that you just mentioned was a feature documentary about Bosnia. I was a theater director up until that point, and that kind of came into my lap. It wasn't something I was planning on segueing into. It wasn't a logical next step for me as a director. And after making that, I made a conscious decision not to tell any more stories about Bosnia because it was very traumatizing to me to kind of revisit that past, because up until that point, I didn't really think about it or talk about it. And I just made the documentary as sort of an expression of what I was going through at that time. And so I spent the next 10 years making films about everything else, writing scripts and doing shorts and doing commercials and music videos. And then I went to grad school. And in grad school, of course, they're like, well, your personal story is the one and only thing that matters. And I was very resistant again, because I just, I don't know, I kind of felt like I told my story and I didn't need to tell any more. But as I started really thinking about all the stories that I've collected over those 10 years that have just been sitting in the back of my head, I started just putting pen to paper and seeing what comes of it. And I was in class and we were pitching ideas for a short script that we wanted to write. It was a screenwriting class. And I thought of this story that a friend of mine told me about his friend, who since has become a mutual friend of ours, who was a 15-year-old kid, a math whiz in Sarajevo during the war, and who got pulled out to go and compete in this math Olympiad in Canada. And I remember hearing it back then thinking, this is insane. Like, you have to understand, I mean, these are like kids who are just getting shot at all the time, and there's no food or water. For like 4 years, they're freezing to death in the middle of winter. And in the middle of all that, there's like something as frivolous as like a math competition. I mean, it's not frivolous in the mind of a 15-year-old, but like in a bigger picture, it's right. Like, really, that he's not going to get pulled out because he's going to get killed otherwise. He's getting pulled out to compete in a math Olympiad. Like, right. It just seemed bizarre. Like, he has a right to live in order to win a gold medal, but he doesn't have a right to live just to live as a kid, right. Like no other kids got pulled out. And so I just, I wanted to tell his story, but also kind of tell a bigger story about what it means to be a kid really at a time of war, and what I went through and what all my other peers went through. And so that's kind of how this came about.
Yeah, it was very personalized in as far as like his point of view and his sister's point of view, also of like what children, like you said, like children actually go through in war times in these situations. What was it that kind of, was there something in there that motivated you, or that you also felt a connection with, like something specific in childhood? Because you were fairly young in the 90s, right? So was there anything that kind of connected y'all, like in theory, as far as like the stories? I know you, like, I mean, what I'm getting at is your father was like a very strong individual and also worked to get people out. And when I watched the film, actually, I thought about your father And seeing his character, I was like, well, I wonder if this is connected somehow because he was so brave, you know. And so curious if you saw any connections there also.
That's interesting. I didn't really connect him to my dad. I tried to write him as somebody like I wish if I'd stayed, like that's who I would have been like. I have a brother, not a sister, but you know, it's sort of a similar age difference. And also like I did take care of my brother a lot once the three of us came out, because my dad stayed in Bosnia the whole time. And my mom, my little brother and I first came to Croatia as refugees, and then came to the United States as refugees, and we're pretty much on our own. And it was the three of us against the world in a way. And even though it wasn't a war zone in Tampa Bay, Florida, for us it kind of was, because it was such a cultural clash. And you know, I had to take care of my brother rather than being a kid myself, you know.
Right.
But really, I think like the biggest thing that I infused in that is my own is this idea that he stays, because the real story, in a real story, my friend Radosh went back. So after he won the bronze medal, he went back with his club and survived the rest of the war in a war zone. But I wanted to infuse the fact that me and a lot of other teenagers at that time, or kids at that time, were left on our own. Like my parents sent me out, and I was on my own in Croatia for about a year before my mom and my brother joined me. And that idea of being so young and so sort of protected by your own little bubble, like in his case, it was math. In my case, it was books. I was a big book nerd, and, you know, and sort of movies. And I was just sort of living in that world and ignoring the reality. And then just be plucked out of that and put in an environment in which you have no idea whether or not you'll ever see your family again. You're with people who are kind to you, but they're strangers. And you're so young that you still really want your mom to take care of you at the end of the day. And so I wanted to explore that and kind of show to the world that not, especially at the time I was making this film, there was a lot of anti-immigrant stuff and the kids at the borders. And I wanted to just show that not all immigrants that come to any country are bad. I don't think any of them are, but like, you know, if we're going to argue that, you know, I just wanted to show,
totally.
You know, some just come because they're kids and they have no other option, you know.
And so, yeah, and some of them don't even know, you know, like just like the point in the film, like he had no, I mean, a lot of children don't have that agency over their lives yet, but yet they're thrust into this position where in a vulnerable state, they have to become adults like overnight. And it's such an amazing thing to watch, and I'm sure to go through especially. But tell me how some of that has affected not just this film, but also some of the screenplays you've written, like as a filmmaker. Like how does that affect you, the storytelling and your directing and capacity? I noticed you're a huge studier of philosophy and you believe in philosophy, and I wonder if that's connected to all of that. And in addition to like loving books too, I'm sure that has a lot of connections to that. But tell me a little bit how that influences your filmmaking.
Interesting. I would say that one of the biggest themes that permeates all the stories, even the ones that have nothing to do with Bosnia that I write, are about identity. I think that the fact that I was so young when all of that happened and sort of in a process of creating my own identity, and I was not given a chance or permission to do that, but instead the identity was created for me by the adults or in my life, you know, and by the circumstances. It took me a long time to really unearth all that garbage that was piled on top of me and get through the PTSD that I suffered due to that, to finally dig out. And I'm still in a process of figuring out who I really am. You know, where do I belong? Like, and that like longing to belong, which I feel all immigrants, especially the ones who came to another country at a very young age, have, you know, but because even my parents, like, you know, they spend 6 months in America, 6 months back home, and they don't belong anywhere really fully. Like they're sort of, you know, remembering. And so I that's sort of the theme that I keep revisiting, and identity and longing to belong. And I think that it sort of taints everything that I, even in regular life, you know. And I think that's sort of how philosophy came into my life. It came as in a time of my life when I was really finally confronting the PTSD symptoms that I was carrying for about 15 years. And it really helped me get through it, just sort of shifting your perspective and realizing that the stories we tell to ourselves in our heads are the ones who are responsible for our well-being. And so if you have a chance to reshape those stories and see them from another angle, maybe you won't be as miserable as I was at the time. So I think it definitely, like, I don't think I would have come across philosophy if I hadn't gone through such a harrowing time in my life that I needed philosophy to get me to the positive side again, you know.
Do you think you found filmmaking in that same way, kind of like, did you find that filmmaking also like helped you maybe work through a lot of those things, or especially in the storytelling like process of writing? Is that kind of therapeutic also? Like, how did you come about to filmmaking?
Actually, my dad's a cinephile, and
Oh, no way.
yeah, and he's not in film at all. He's an economist, but he loved movies. And when I was a kid, I think to this day my mom would argue I'm very much a daddy's girl. And but when I was a kid, I was, you know, whatever my dad liked, I liked, and so we watched movies together. Like that's what we did, you know, in all our time that I would spend with my dad is we would watch movies. And but you know, I mean, you have, like, my dad was like 24 when I was born. So like he's in his early 30s and he's watching, you know, all the gangster movies, and I'm 6 and I'm, you know, going on for the ride. I'm like,
right.
hey, God, you know, Godfellas, like, no worries. I'm 6, I get it. So by the time I was 8, I learned that there was a job of a director, that there was somebody who actually made this, and that was a job. And the moment that I learned that it existed, I said, okay, that's what I want to be. Really purely motivated by wanting to make something my dad would watch and be proud of, you know, as all kids do. But I never really, I think that in a way it found me in that way, because I think I was born to do this. Like once I realized what it was, it felt like it fit like a glove. It was just perfect, you know. And life has been pretty generous in terms of difficulty with me, and I'm grateful for all of it because I learned through all of it. But there's been so many opportunities for me to just give up, you know, and to walk away, and nobody would have judged me or questioned it, because they would just be like, oh yeah, you know, she finally cracked, like, you know, like she tried, and you know, and I never did, because it just sort of, it feels so natural. And and you know, like they talk about flow and what your genius is and all that stuff. For me, the only time I feel alive is when I'm creating movies, when I'm directing, when I'm with a group of people and we're brainstorming at solutions of how to create something that's in my head and only I can see. And the same with writing. I really enjoy writing, and I think through the process of writing, I do somehow find it therapeutic, especially because I'll infuse all the characters with elements of myself and then work through them, something that I might have to work through with my therapist.
And it's probably a lot cheaper too, because it's all your own time, right? So tell me about variables. Like, so what was the filming like there? So screenplay came out, you got it funded. Where did you film the movie?
So we filmed the entire film in Los Angeles.
Huh.
And around LA, like we went to San Pedro for the tunnel scene, because we found a tunnel over there, and but downtown LA and Los Feliz for all the Bosnian scenes, because believe it or not, you can find buildings that can pass for war-torn Bosnia.
Same, yeah. Same here, yeah.
Yeah, you know, and then like the the Canadian stuff we shot around USC. Because it was, so basically I won, Alfred P. Sloan Foundation gives 2 grants every year to USC students who want to make short films about STEM subjects. And so I pitched that and I got the grant for it. And that's really how we funded it. And so as part of it, it kind of had to be connected with USC. And so we tried to use as much of USC buildings and stuff like that, because we could get it for free, and it really stretched our budget to how we could actually make it for that amount, because otherwise we wouldn't have been able to.
Yeah, I would have never guessed. I mean, I guess if it was on a set or something in LA for like the Bosnia scenes, like the war scenes, I mean, it was really well done. Like you fooled a lot of people, I'm sure. I was like, is she filming on location? I couldn't really tell exactly. So what were some of the challenges that you found with this project in filming, either around, you know, LA or just in general, like getting it off the ground? It's wonderful that you got that grant starting out. I'm sure that was really helpful. But what are some other hurdles that you might have had on the way?
I mean, I'd say the biggest one was definitely finding a location that could fit Bosnia. I mean, I think that took us the longest. We were filming it in August, and I think in June we were driving around trying to find places, and it was just really my two producers and me, like in a car driving around, and then a DP, because the cinematographer was a friend of mine from New York. She was living in New York at the time, and so she wasn't flying in until when we were actually filming. So we're just trying to like find locations and send her pictures, and she and I did about 7 films prior to that, so we had a language, and I didn't necessarily need her on location with me as we were scouting, because we kind of have a shorthand. But yeah, so that was a really big challenge. And, for a while we considered, okay, well, maybe we should go to Bosnia and film there. But once we added up all the money, we're like, no, we can maybe fly like 3 people over.
Right. Yeah.
So we didn't really, and then, I would say the second one was then trying to find kids who speak Bosnian, because believe it or not, even though there's so many of us in the United States, not many of the kids speak Bosnian. I guess, what I heard a lot from the parents is they tried, but they were so busy trying to build their lives, and the kids would get really embarrassed in school by having an accent or speaking another language. And so they rejected it. And so we put a campaign around the entire United States for parents to send their kids tapes in. And, and that lasted probably about 6 months. And in 6 months, only got maybe 10 that we could that we can choose from for all the roles, for all three of the roles. And so that was really crazy. I mean, it was really, really difficult. And in the end, I mean, the kid we found to play Nikola, I mean, he's never acted before. He doesn't want to be an actor. That was just sort of a thing that he could do. And I felt like he felt like the right fit for the character. So we just went for it.
Oh, he was very good. Yeah. And he played it very strongly and I can't believe he's not like an actual actor. I thought for sure it came together, but obviously wonderful direction as well. Tell me about something interesting that maybe happened around the set or filming, like anything you want to share that was interesting during this process?
Ooh, that's,
I mean, independent films, that's kind of a loaded question, but it sounds like you had some, this is like probably one of the best projects to direct too, because like you're just and produce, because you're constantly problem solving, right? Like finding characters and finding locations and all of these things. And but what is something that you absolutely take away and you'll remember forever just about this particular project?
Okay, okay, I have one. So my original script had originally in a story, there was 5 of them. 5 kids went from Bosnia to Canada. And once I realized I couldn't find that many kids who spoke Bosnian, I cut down to 3. I was like, I think I can find 3. I knew some like parents already, and so I wrote for 3. It was 2 boys and a girl, and we went and auditioned and found all these and found 3 kids. We're like, okay, great. And so 2 of them, Haris was coming from Florida, and then this other kid who was going to play his best friend, were flying in from Florida. And so Haris flew in to LA and we started filming. And on like a 3rd day of filming, the other kid was supposed to fly in with his dad for 4 days, and we shoot out his scenes and he goes back home. And we're on set, and I get a text that I don't check until we're in between setups that says, from my parents who live in Florida, that says they're not coming. And I said, well, what do you mean they're not coming? Like, who's not coming? I mean, we're between setups, right? So I have like maybe 10 minutes before, because we're on a rig, like we pre-lit the whole thing. So there's not a lot of waiting. Like this isn't like I have an hour now to solve a problem. I just have 10 minutes to be like, what? So I handed to my producer. I'm like, I have no idea what they're talking about. Can you find out? And then on the next setup, next like break, they come to me and say, the kid that's supposed to fly in tonight, they're not coming. His dad changed his mind and they're just not going to come. And I'm like, okay, well, I can't deal with this until we finish. So you guys deal with it. And they tried, like my producers tried, like they called all the other people that we knew, and we couldn't find another kid. And so we're supposed to start filming tomorrow at 7 a.m. By the time we wrap, it's 8 p.m. and I'm told that we don't have a kid. And I don't know what to do because we booked everything and all the other actors are coming, and, you know, and I'm not gonna, you know, I'm gonna be honest about it. I totally had a meltdown. Like I went home and like sat in a corner and cried. And then my producer and my cinematographer were like, well, let's just give her a minute. So they like left, and then they came back and they said, okay, so, you know, there's two options the way we see it. You either fold, like in the 3 days we shot, we just put them aside and we try to regroup and find another kid and restart again whenever we find another kid, or you rewrite. And you know, it's very, I don't know, like, I don't know about you, but like for me, whenever somebody's like a rewrite is forced upon me rather than something that I came up with, my initial reaction is like, no, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. So I had about 15 minutes of it's not going to work. And then I, you know, I had a shot of whiskey, and then I said, okay, so let's try it. And I stayed up all night. I rewrote the like, it was three different, like the scene that the two of them were in a hotel room, the girl and the boy, it was supposed to be two boys. There was other scenes that got scrapped. It was just, I completely rewrote about half of the script, and then showed up the next day on set, and I said, just handed them new pages, and I said, okay, this is what we're filming, you know. And I think the reason I'll remember that is, you know, like all the joking aside, is that it taught me that when, you know, situations like that happen, I have it in me to pull through and keep the ship going no matter what. And that even if I need to take a moment to go have a meltdown and take a shot of whiskey, if that's all it takes, that's not bad, you know, like it could have been much, much worse. So I proved to myself that I'm stronger as an artist than I thought I was.
That's fantastic. And yeah, I was going to ask you next, like, what is your most proudest moment of this filming on this process? But I think that may have like answered that question. But if there's something else is there something else that you're just like truly proud of in this film, in addition to finding that self-growth and finding like what kind of director you are? Is there something else about this picture that really stands out?
I mean, I would also say that another thing that I was proud of is working with non-actors. This is my first time. I'm a trained theater director and then a trained film director, and I know how to talk to trained actors. And it was really remarkable on day one. The first thing that we shot was it was the sniper alley. So him running through the sniper alley. And like I said, this is a kid who's never, I mean, when we auditioned him, we handed him a script and he started reading like INT home, you know, he didn't know, like he's never seen the script before in his entire life. And you know, and so I tried my usual, you know, how I talk to the actors, and he just looked at me blank. He's like, I have no idea what you just said. Can you talk to me normally? And I had to really quickly learn how to communicate with him in a way that makes him comfortable, because there's, you know, 30 people around him with this giant camera in his face, and he's supposed to have an emotion when all he feels is terrified, you know, and then to try and, you know, get his guard down, get him to get into this character, which he doesn't, you know, to him, like the idea of, okay, now there's a character and it's not you. He's just like, no, that's too much. Like, I just need to know in this moment, like I'm feeling this, and I'll try and figure that out. And so just kind of learning how to communicate with him. And then also with the girl who played his sister, who also is not an actor. And she just showed up and she memorized everything really well. And she just stood there and like told me like a recitation, you know. And I was like, okay, no, let's, you know, and that was probably the toughest day for me on set, was the scene that I had to do with the two of them, because it's just the two of them, you know, otherwise I had other actors to rely on, you know, so I can just sort of work with one, and then the other person would just sort of do their thing. And I was really, really incredibly fortunate to have Mira Furlan, who plays the teacher. She's a very famous actress back home and has become a really good friend of mine. And, you know, with her, like, she's a gift to the director. I mean, she literally shows up and she gives you an amazing performance, take after take after take. And you just kind of look at her and go, okay, great, my job's done. And I'm just going to reap the rewards.
Those are the best. That is the best days for sure.
Yeah,
that's incredible. So what are you on to next? Like, this film's been really well received and I guess had like an incredible run. Like, are you taking a break? Are you into the next thing? Are you writing? Like, what's on the horizon for Sabina?
Sure. Yeah, it's been, and this film is like a little film that could, like, I never really thought it was going to become as big of a, as successful as, and I mean, all my kids I love equally, but you know, and this is probably
Yeah.
the 13th short film that I made. And so I just kind of, I'd make short films and just hope they reach an audience. And this one did really well. I won a bunch of awards, and, you know, and it's going to festivals. And I love that it's getting seen all around United States and the world, because
Mm-hmm.
I feel it's a story that many people can relate to, but they don't know yet. And so, you know, but I'm no, there's no rest for the ambitious. I don't sit still well for a long time, even though this year has been kind of weird for everybody. And so, but I am writing. Well, a couple of things. So I have a feature script that I already finished, and we're in the process of signing with a production company, and hopefully hoping to film it next winter, like November, December in Florida. It's you know, yet again another exploration of identity.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's like a neo noir set in Bosnian community in Florida, about an investment banker, a Bosnian American investment banker whose younger brother dies under suspicious circumstances. And in order to find out what happened, he has to go back to his roots and go back into the community and kind of rediscover his own Bosnianness in the process.
Excellent.
So that's sort of the next thing that I'm working on.
That's terrific. We can't wait to see more from that and hear more about that. If anybody would like to like find out more about you and your work, where can they reach out?
They can actually, on my website, I have a contact me, and, you know, there's like a professional thing, you go through my manager. But if you want to just reach me, if you type in you know, it actually does reach me. And I try to answer all the emails that I get, especially, you know, if it's from an up and coming filmmaker who has any questions about that. I really, I want to help and share what I learned, and I paid a lot of money for my USC education. So if I can share that with anybody, I'll be more than happy to.
That's terrific. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know it's very late where you are. And thank you, viewers, for coming out and for seeing this film. Please check it out, and for checking out this Q&A. And we'll see everybody soon. Thank you all again.
Thank you. Bye.